Welcome to the latest feminist question time from Women's Declaration. I identify as Joe Brew today. My name's Tracy, I'm standing in for her and welcoming a diverse European panel for you today. First speaking will be Brandubh, a young Irish schoolgirl speaking about gender ideology in Irish schools. She'll be followed by Danielle Loughrey from Ireland, who's giving an update on the Ladies Gaelic Football Association transgender inclusion policy. Then we have Monica Ricci Sargentini from Italy. Monica is giving an update on Italy's ban on surrogacy abroad. And then we have Leah Carvalho from Portugal, giving an update on gender identity in Portugal. And we also have Tonya Gjevion, if I've pronounced that right, giving an update from Norway on the real Dyke March happening in Berlin on the 23rd of June. So thank you all for coming today, our panelists and our participants. And thank you to the tech team, Bernadette, who's going to keep me right today. We could start then by welcoming our youngest star, Brandubh, who's recently gone viral in America after a blistering poem she delivered at Let Women Speak Belfast.
I started secondary school in September 2021 when I was 12 years old, and I was not an activist. I knew about gender ideology and I knew it was all insanity, but it just felt like this really faraway thing that had absolutely nothing to do with me. But that all changed when it abruptly came into my life just a few weeks later. Later that year in November, my school celebrated Stand Up Week, which is also known as Stand Up Awareness Week. This week is supposedly about not bullying LGBTQ plus people, which I support completely. Nobody should have a problem with that. And nobody should be bullied at all. But that wasn't true. The week was really about shoving TQ plus propaganda down our throats. Stand Up Week is organised by Belong To, which in that image there you can see that's an extract from their teacher training manual. And yeah, Belong To is such a dangerous organisation. And they are so anti-safeguarding, it's unbelievable. So in that extract on your screen there, you can see that they tell teachers to keep secrets from parents and to lie to parents about their children. It is it's unbelievable that this can happen and it's excused and it's pushed in schools. That's an extract from a booklet I was given in class during Stand-Up Week. Some of the terms, this was written by Belong To as well. So some of the terms there include cisgender or cis, and it is described as someone whose gender identity matches the sex they were assigned at birth. There's just so much rubbish there. Like, your sex isn't assigned at birth. And also, I and many other women find the term cis offensive, but it's still being pushed on people in school, which is just outrageous. And then they talk about pronouns, and they go into neo-pronouns as well. And they just sound so ridiculous. I'm not sure how people can use these with a straight face, but yep, people do. So in the class where I was given this booklet, I asked my teacher some questions about gender ideology. My first question was to explain what is in the plus. I'm sure we'd all like to know that. But it's just so open-ended, but everyone is expected to support it without question. So I asked him, and his answer was incredibly vague. It did not make sense at all. So I made my question a little bit more precise, and I asked, is there a possibility paedophilia could be in the plus? And this is actually terrifying, but he couldn't give me a definite answer. He left that, yeah. Another question I asked was about the issue of men identifying as trans in order to get into women's prisons. He told me this was a very extreme example. Even if it was extreme and didn't happen a lot, that still is outrageous. Even one man being locked up in a women's prison is one man too many. Anyway, it's not extreme because it's happening all the time. But he then went on to say, and I'm quoting him here, hopefully situations like that wouldn't arise. Well, I'm sure they do. Of course they do. But hopefully situations like that wouldn't arise. So he clearly has no clue what he was talking about. At the end of stand-up week on the Friday, the Progress Pride flag was raised and all the students were expected to clap and cheer. Well, I refused because I was not prepared to celebrate the erasure of my sex class, because that's what I see when I see that flag. All I see is the pink and blue, and that is erasing my rights as a sex class. But I watched from afar as everyone else clapped and cheered, and the atmosphere was just so cult-like. It was insane. I just could not believe what I was seeing. And this cult-like atmosphere, it has absolutely no place in schools. On that Friday, I went home thinking, thank goodness, I won't have to deal with this rubbish for another year. But yeah, that wasn't the case. It didn't stop. The next Monday, my science teacher pulled me out of class. And yes, this was my science teacher. She pulled me out of class and told me that I had made very offensive comments about trans people, and that some people in my class had perceived me as being transphobic. Which was, yeah, so she expected me to be horrified and terribly apologetic, because that's the worst thing you can do these days, being accused of transphobia. But, oh well, I wasn't. We argued for around half an hour about it, and the conversation ended with her, my science teacher, telling me that being a man or a woman has nothing to do with your reproductive system, and that sex is a spectrum. I mean, how am I supposed to trust anything she says now? This is my science teacher. I mean, it's just... Yeah, I can still barely believe that happened. It's still so surreal to this day. But it wasn't over yet. A few weeks later, I got pulled out of class, this time by my year head, again for my offensive comments, aka questions. My year head told me that because my school is so inclusive, I shouldn't voice my beliefs there. And my beliefs are just... they're not even beliefs. I just understand reality. That's not a belief, but anyway. So yeah. So because my school is so inclusive, my beliefs aren't welcome here. So how is that inclusive in the slightest? It's not. But, oh, and then, so yeah, I told him that I have every right to talk about reality if I want to, and that I will continue to do so. He said that if I keep doing that, he told me that more drastic action would have to be taken. So yeah, everyone in my class has been, they really hated that they were really outraged about what I asked, the questions I asked in that class. And they've been bullying me since. No one will talk to me. In a class without a seating plan, I will sit down and all the students will actively avoid that table, because you can't associate with the turf, because that'd be just so awful. So, yeah, and the teachers do nothing about it, because, yeah, apparently it seems I deserve it. In one class, we were put into partners to work on a project. The girl I was working with went up to the teacher, and they had a discussion, and then suddenly something happened, and I had to work on my own. Like, it was fairly obvious what happened there. The girl had complained about having to work with a transphobe, and the teacher went, oh, well, that's not right. You shouldn't have to work with her. And I had to work on my own. The other thing I find really interesting about my school is the old-fashioned misogyny coexists with this new woke version. For example, with a sport like tennis, an extracurricular activity, girls will sometimes be asked to give their rackets to boys if the boys forgot theirs. So the boys are prioritized over the girls. It's just outrageous. And when it comes to this, they know the difference between boys and girls. So my school has tried to gaslight me into thinking reality isn't real. They've tried to silence me. They've tried to shut me up. And they've tried to intimidate me into silence. But well, they failed miserably, and well, they don't know what they've unleashed on the world because I am not backing down. I was not an activist when I started at that school, but I definitely am now.
That is just fantastic. Your courage is unreal. There's so much love for you here in the comments. I don't know if you have the chat turned on.
Yeah, I can see.
It's just appalling that your school are not just enabling the bullying, but participating in it.
I
And
know, yeah.
are you and your family considering any legal action against the school?
We're trying to do something, but it's just difficult because you need to find the right solicitor and everything because and it's also difficult when I'm still in there because if I'm still in there, so we're trying to find a different school that I can move to, and we're hoping we might have found one, but so many schools have been captured by this, and I don't want to move to one that's been captured, another school that's been captured by this. So when I'm in another school, maybe we can consider something about legal action.
Well, I think we probably need to put out a call then for some solicitor to develop the courage to take on this case because it is just absolutely outrageous how you're being treated, not just by your peers, but by the teachers who have the statutory responsibility for your safeguarding. So if any Irish solicitors are watching this, please do get in touch and send someone Brandubh's way, because really, because you're being so brave with this, you could be the person that takes a legal action that then helps many other students. It shouldn't be on your shoulders, but they seem to be very strong shoulders. So thank you very much. I think we can take a couple of the quick questions now. Someone's asked if you're selling your poem with the suffragette artwork. I think that's a reference to some artwork that was doing the rounds on Twitter.
Yeah, I haven't thought about that yet.
We'd need to get in touch with the artist and see if we could work something
yeah.
out. The other two questions are about allies. Do you have adults on your side or any girlfriends supporting you and sticking by you in school? Any guys?
No, I think the boys in school know it's all insanity. They've said stuff that's like, this is rubbish. But they won't. They just see it as a joke. They don't take it seriously. So they don't. I wouldn't consider them as allies, to be honest with you.
Okay, well then, thank you very much, and go get yourself a nice cup of tea or glass of water after that brilliant presentation, and we'll come north in Ireland to Danielle in Donegal. Thanks again, Brandubh, and hello, Danielle.
Thanks, Tracy. Hello, everybody. How are you all? Basically, my presentation is I'm going to discuss the LGFA trans policy from my side, from my perspective as a mother, as a woman, as a player, a coach, a volunteer. I've been involved in sport for a very long time. So this is just how I see this policy affecting myself and fellow women of Ireland and further afield. I'll give you a small little bit of background about the LGFA and the GAA. The GAA is the national governing body over the men's game in Ireland, and the LGFA is the national body over the female game in Ireland. Now, the GAA was founded back in 1888. It took over 90 years after that, in 1974, before the ladies game came into being. It started with humble beginnings back in the 1960s, where it was really actually a gimmick. It was a novel attraction. It was a way to pull in a crowd into your local club to raise money for local charities. And at this point as well, the GAA was already so well established that they weren't very welcoming on letting any women into play in their national sport. So, but the LGFA, the women that were playing the game, decided that they were not going to be undeterred by this. So them and their allies pushed forward, and they did form the LGFA. And since its formation, like, the LGFA is basically almost a worldwide organization now. It has ladies teams and clubs in nearly every country around the globe. And people need to understand that GAA clubs they're steeped in history and culture. They're a massive thing in nearly every city and town and village around Ireland and beyond. It is more than just a sports club. GAA clubs are social gatherings, and they're a fantastic aspect to everyone's life. So that's just a quick wee background for people who aren't sure what the LGFA is. So it's a national governing body for Ladies Gaelic Football in Ireland and across the world. We'll move on then to how sort of the LGFA perceived the notion that this policy needed to come about. So in August 2022, in a Dublin Championship final, there was an incident where a referee stopped the game due to the presence of a trans-identifying male in one of the teams. Now, the ref didn't know what to do, so after a bit of chit-chat, the game did continue on. But the incident drew a lot of attention online, and it sparked from that then that the LGFA in September 2022 published a statement, which it can be seen in many papers and online, where it states the LGFA is currently working in consultation with their counterparts in the GAA and other sporting organisations in relation to developing policy in this area. So that was September 2022. Then if we move on to the actual introduction of the policy, in February 2023, county boards were sent an email by the LGFA administration, which stated now that they had this LGFA policy. But for a lot of people, they assumed that this was going to be the start of the consultation, because at this point, nobody at grassroots level, county level, or provincial levels, as far as I have been made aware of, were contacted by the LGFA to be part of the consultation. So everybody thought, okay, it's going to start coming from here. But now, lo and behold, the LGFA had the policy already written and was ready to have it adopted. So after a brief discussion at a Central Council meeting on the 15th of February this year, the policy was voted on and adopted. Now, the people at this meeting are delegates from counties all around Ireland. They didn't get a chance to talk to any of their members about how they viewed this policy. So they were basically voting blindly. So the policy was immediately adopted and put on the website for applications to come in. And lo and behold, again, not more than about 6 weeks later, the first trans-identifying male was given approval by the LGFA Transgender Application Committee to play Ladies Gaelic Football. And still to this day, though, we have no idea who is on that committee or what their expertise are. So it was all a very rushed process that no players had any real say in any of it. So if we move on then, we'll talk about how there was a lot of uproar and public outcry at about the speed and the nature at which the policy was formed and approved, as well as its contents. Now, the LGFA did say that they undertook a comprehensive consultation process, but we've no idea who they consulted with. We've no idea what legislation they looked at. They did say they looked at international best practices, but for me, international best practices as well would be like World Rugby, World Aquatics, World Athletics. They've changed their policies now. So I don't know. Nobody knows what the LGFA looked at. And the LGFA say they looked at the Equal Status Act and the Gender Recognition Act. Now, the Equal Status Act, up to a point, it's not discrimination for a club to be for a particular type of people. So having a team for women is not discrimination. But the issue, I think, comes from this is that the GRA in Ireland, once somebody is given a gender recognition cert, that it almost gives them access to female sports and changing areas. So it's really, I'm going to push that the GRA as well be looked at and amended by the government. We'll move on then. Like he says, what policy is there now and it's in place. The LGFA now has 3 application forms. One is for somebody over 18 years old. There's an application for somebody between 12 and 15 years old. And there's an application form for people aged 16 and 17 years old. Now, the only requirements are that they have a letter from their doctor stating that, number 1, the applicant is transitioning or transitioned. And number 2, that the applicant's testosterone levels are equal to or less than 10 nanomoles per litre for the previous 12 months. Now, at this stage in these proceedings, I'm sure everybody here all knows that an average female testosterone levels don't go nearly above 2.4, 2.5 nanomoles per litre at the most. So what this policy has done, it has broken the human body down into a testosterone level. And to me, the human body is far too complicated to be able to be boiled down to that. I mean, you only need to use your eyes every day to see male advantage over female advantage when it comes to sports, with their, you know, their taller, higher muscle mass, less body fat, stronger bones, larger hearts. I mean, that all translates onto a Gaelic pitch as a male who can run faster, jump higher, jump further, be physically stronger. You know, so we all know, hands down, that male advantage is something that it's there and it cannot be taken away. We'll move on then to the risk of injury, which is going to be a huge thing with this. If we, you know, some people will say that ladies Gaelic football is a non-contact sport. Now, ladies Gaelic football may not be as physical as the men's game, but in my experience of 3 decades of playing the game and coaching the game, it is anything but non-contact. It is a physical sport, and women who love the game get stuck in. It's as simple as that. And the risk of injury is going to become far more apparent if more and more applicants are given the go-ahead to play. Only recently, in women's field hockey, which is another non-contact sport in Scotland, a trans-identified male injured a young female opposition player. According to eyewitness, she was flattened, is the word that they use. The game had to be halted for several minutes. She was taken out of the game then with head, neck, hip injuries. Also, again, we have a trans-identified male in Australia who is playing soccer there, who has been noted to have injured a number of female opposition players, one of whom I believe had to undergo hospital treatment. There's also the young American girl in America who was injured severely in a volleyball game, where a transgender or a trans-identified male spiked the ball so hard at her that she was concussed. And that happened in September 22, and she is still suffering the effects of that injury today. And as far as I can see it, one female injured by a trans-identified male is too many. We play sports with our bodies, not with our feelings. It's too big a risk. And then following on from that risk, we come next, the next slide is about insurance. I just give you a few examples there of the injuries that can happen with a trans-identified male allowed to play women's sports. So a logical follow-on to them, to me, is an insurance worry. We have no idea if the LGFA have spoken to the underwriters at Allianz Insurance about this policy. I have no idea if Allianz are aware that the LGFA have already approved a trans-identified male to play or female sport. I would like to know, have the premiums been raised? And if they have been raised, well, how are the LGFA planning on offsetting these extra charges? Are they going to start charging LGFA members more from major membership? Are we going to see fees at gates going up to cover the costs of this? You know, are we as females going to have to end up paying for a policy that we don't want? It's safe to say we know that a trans-identified male on a pitch is going to cause a higher increase on risk to female players. Therefore, there's going to be more claims and higher premiums. Now, the LGFA already encourages its members to have private health insurance to cover some medical costs, as its injury fund is not an insurance policy. So now every member who plays, or any parent who has an underage player who plays this sport, is going to have to check with their own private insurance as well if their child or they themselves are going to be covered if they're injured while playing against a trans-identified male on an LGFA pitch. So it throws up a lot of issues that way for people also. We'll move on to the next slide then, where I am going to speak quickly about safeguarding privacy and dignity. Like the LGFA have made this policy, but they haven't provided any guidelines to clubs on how the use of changing rooms, shower and toilet facilities are to be used. If there is an applicant who is given approval onto a team and you have to host that team, what facilities do you need to provide? Or are they going to be in with, you know, the female players? The policy does nothing in relation to safeguarding, especially of underage players. You could now have a 15-year-old girl in a changing room with a fully intact trans-identifying male. So safeguarding for all intended purposes has been fully abandoned. And it definitely takes away the privacy and the dignity of its female players. Someone said to me recently, actually, do you know why they scan every single suitcase at an airport? it's because they've no idea which one has the bomb in it. And what we're doing now is good men know not to enter female-only spaces, so that the more undesirable men who do will stand out. Like, sports categories were developed to protect women's safety, so the good men know to stay out, and the more undesirable ones are being let in. It feels to me like we are in a situation now where, why should we bother locking the doors when our sporting bodies are giving the men the key to enter? So it's definitely, they've done nothing in regards to safeguarding privacy or dignity of its players. I'll move on now, and I'll speak briefly about fairness and safety. Women require female-only categories to play sports fairly and safely. It's what they were created for. I mean, you look at the moment at the world of cycling, it's also a non-contact sport. And recently there's been a 24-year-old girl who has given up cycling, 24 years old, saying, I've left cycling. Losing to a trans rider hurts on a million different levels. That's just shocking. This girl has worked all her life. She's only 24 and she's already decided to give up. A recent article as well by Mariah Burton Nelson. At the moment I read it anyway, it listed 58 trans identifying males as winners in women's sports. Now that is just the tip of the iceberg. And I believe if more sporting bodies fall foul of prioritizing inclusion over safety and fairness, then this is going to become more and more important. It's going to happen more and more here in Ireland. Women are going to lose out in positions on teams. They're going to lose out on accolades, awards, scholarships, prize monies. They're going to lose out on so many opportunities. And I know now some sporting organisations have begun to change their policies, but a lot of them still only change them at the elite level. Now, your future elite levels come from your grassroots player pathways from their local clubs. And if we aren't able to provide the local club with safety and fairness to them, then our elite athletes are not going to be there because they're not coming through those grassroots programs that we have in place for them. We have to provide safety and fairness to all women, no matter what level they compete at. So now I'm going to move on to what I call my call to action. This is the people that I would like to call on to actually stand up now and do something for the women of Ireland. I'm going to call on the LGFA, Michael Naughton and Helen O'Rourke, to please listen to your members, your players, your coaches, review the policy immediately. We need an association that protects its female players, one that does not disregard our rights to safeguarding privacy, dignity, fairness and safety. I'm also going to call on the GEA, Liam McCarthy and Jarlath Burns to ask them, can they shed light on the policy? Did they consult on the policy as the LGFA claimed back in September 22? In light of the fact now that we're talking about integration of all the associations, are they going to stand over this policy? I believe the GEA should be stepping up to find a way to encourage non-conforming males to feel more comfortable in the men's game rather than threatening the safety and fairness of the ladies' game. I'm going to ask the Camogie Association also, Hilda Breslin and Sinead McNulty, are they going to stand over this policy also? Have they consulted with their players regarding this transgender policy? Are their players happy with the possibility of this policy now becoming theirs? I'm going to call on the President of Ireland, the Oireachtas, the Dáil, the Seanad, senators and TDs. You have the power now to protect the women of Ireland. Amend the GRA. Self-ID can lead and has led to undesirable men flaunting the law to get away with things that they wouldn't normally get away with. Sex must be a protected characteristic, not gender. Sex is a biological attribute. Gender is a social construct. Sex determines your health issues, your treatment plans, not your gender. We have to recognize these facts and protect biological sex. I'm also going to call on the Ministers for Sport, Catherine Martin and Thomas Byrne. Have you held talks with Sport in Ireland, the national governing bodies of sport and the local partnerships, in relation to these transgender policies? What are you doing to protect the women's categories in sports? Public money is used to help fund the LGFA. So me as a member of your public, I would like to know what you are doing to get to the bottom of this, to aid and protect women's sports. On the next page then as well, I'm also going to call on the Integration Steering Committee, Mary McAleese. They recently published a brief on integration. It mentions gender a lot in this brief, and I would like them to look at that, and it really should, to me, specify sex, not gender. They use the integration of Gulf Ireland as an example in this brief. Now, Gulf Ireland's gender policy is one of the vaguest policies out there. It almost unconditionally allows trans-identifying males to play the ladies' game. Now, we cannot let ladies Gaelic football end up like that. The brief also states that integration is underpinned by equality. Then we have to help the associations address the unfair advantage of males over females in our sport, on the pitch as well as off the pitch. I'm going to call on Sport Ireland, UNMA. They are the statutory authority that oversees the development of sport in Ireland. Do they see this policy as developing sport for females in Ireland? Like at the moment, Sport Ireland say they are undertaking a gender inclusion consultation process. Well, I hope that they learn from other people's mistakes around the world and they step up and protect the women's categories. I'm going to call on the Federation of Irish Sports, Claire McGrath. The Federation of Irish Sports is the independent and authoritative voice of Irish sports national governing bodies. The Federation states that it is committed to influencing the development of effective sports policies. Now, how independent is the Federation? Did they have any influence over the LGFA on the policy? Do they believe that the LGFA policy to be effective? You know, perhaps now at this point, they can step in and aid the LGFA in reviewing the policy. I'm also going to call on the Gaelic Players Association, Brian McCreath and Tom Parsons. Now, the GPA wants to uphold the brilliance of our inter-county players. Female players still have a long battle ahead of them whenever it comes to the equality of the sexes. And the introduction of this policy is going to make it harder for the female players to uphold this brilliance if they are not going to be initially even joining their sports due to the presence of trans-identifying males either on their teams or on opposition teams. They're not even going to join their local clubs due to the fact that our governing sporting body has shown no respect for their safeguarding, their safety or their fairness in sport. You know, trans-identifying male inclusion means female exclusion. And finally, I'm going to call on everyone, players, parents, coaches, representatives, the media, everybody in Ireland, further afield, speak to your local clubs, your county boards, your councillors, your politicians. Speak up for the right to safety, privacy, dignity and fairness of your wives, your partners, your daughters, your nieces, your friends. Speaking up is not bigotry or transphobia or discrimination. We must get behind this. We cannot allow sex to be replaced by gender identity in our laws and our policies. So yeah, I just call on everybody to get behind it, and hopefully over the next while I will get some more answers. But for now, let's save women's sports and hope that something can be done. Thank you.
Wonderful presentation, Danielle. That very clear. Was it this issue that basically brought to your attention the issues of self-ID and gender identity in law in Ireland?
I'd already been aware of it. I'd been watching what was happening in countries around the world when it comes to self-ID and trans-identifying males taking part in women's sports. And I was always thinking to myself, well, aren't we lucky it's not here yet? And now the fact that the association which I've been involved in for over 30 years is the first one to step up now and take away the female right to sports, it's heartbreaking, and I hope that it changes very soon.
I love that you covered not just the safety and the fairness, but also issues of privacy and that whole thing of girls being discouraged to even get involved in the first place. And I was thinking, even when you were talking about injury and people saying it's a non-contact sport, just the fear of injury can affect how someone plays. You hold yourself back when you're running if you're worried about colliding with a much bigger, stronger man. So the impacts are just terrible. you're able to hang around afterwards, aren't you?
I will, yes, hopefully hang around for a while, yes.
One quick question now, but I'm just being mindful of the time and my first day on the job. So someone's asking if many people are speaking out within GAA circles?
Not publicly, but there has been a lot of support, saying a lot of the people who initially even thought, oh, well, this policy is a good thing, but when they said they actually sit down now and looked at it and read through it and seen what it means, they're starting to realize that no, this does need to be looked at and reviewed. And I hope over time now, very quickly, we will have it reviewed and get some changes made.
Great, because I do know that a lot of parents still don't realise if their girls aren't at the age yet where this affects them, they haven't heard of it. So I think we absolutely need to do a concerted press effort here to get some stories out. And I just wanted to add to that, there is a woman in the north who wrote an excellent letter to Micheál Naughton and did get speaking to him, and he was talking about legal advice, but as we know, that never became a matter of actual consultation. So he has a lot of questions to answer there. Well, thank you very much again. Wonderful presentation. And next up is Leah. Boa tarde.
Boa tarde. Thank you. In 2018, Portugal became one of the very few countries boosting a seemingly all-encompassing self-ID law. The effects and repercussions of this law were, for the most part, hidden from public discussion. As in many other countries, in Portugal, trans issues and gender identity ideology have gone from a niche, fringe interest to receiving a lot of positive attention in the media and achieving in a few short years what many human rights movements could not achieve with decades of work. Not only concrete changes to the law, but international support from politicians, health organizations, and so on, which allowed for these changes in the first place. While the process to have one's gender identity changed and legally recognized was very long, involving individual court decisions, the surgeries that purpose to change one's sex to match perceived gender identity had been paid for by the public health system since 2005, and have also been an option in the private sector. Interestingly, since 2005, it appears that Portugal has gone against the trend in other countries by having more women seeking gender reassignment surgery than men, according to the surgeon João Décio Ferreira, who was at the time the only one working with this type of procedure in the public sector, claimed that he had done 33 operations on women seeking to identify as men and only 11 on men who claimed to identify as women. Is this happening because high sexism and male chauvinism in the country? That's my question about this. The process to change one's sex marker and name in official documents was long one because the people seeking to do it had to effectively sue the government and allege that a mistake had been made regarding their gender identity. So the goal of this law was to expedite the process and turn it into just another administrative act that could be done by anyone provided they were of legal age over 18, had a medical report made by a multidisciplinary team with a diagnosis of perturbation of gender identity, and were willing to pay an administrative fee. The public document regarding this discussion in Portuguese Parliament stated, in translation, this new procedure is justified by the fact that the current solution for these cases is not the most appropriate for reasons of justice and because this is the path most followed at European level. In 2012, gender identity was recognized as a characteristic to respect and not discriminate against in the students' statute and ethics in schools. In 2015, gender identity became a protected category in the labor code. Both of these changes went by largely unnoticed. In October 2017, they held a debate regarding proposals by parliamentary parties to change the law to allow teenagers of 16 to change their name and sex marker without requiring a medical report. One proposal made by the party Bloc de Esquerda even thought to criminalize parents who refused to allow their children to change their name and sex marker. This is absolutely crazy. Although this was not approved by Parliament, the proposals to remove the need for a medical report and lower the age to 16 did eventually succeed in 2018. When the Self-ID law was passed with an overwhelming majority in the Portuguese Parliament, the opposition came from right-wing parties. All parties on the left voted for the law. Support for the measure was justified with apparent worldwide scientific consensus. The Self-ID law also effectively ends segregated spaces. For instance, in 2022, it was decided that prisoners would be housed in jail according to their gender identity and not their sex, regardless of whether or not they had undergone any medical procedures. By 2018, there was a bigger, more concentrated effort to center trans issues and gender identity ideology in the public's consciousness. For instance, manifestos for pride marches all over the country started to give trans people and non-binary identities an even greater focus. And some women's organizations started to back this ideology. The ones who don't have not publicly focused on this issue. This was intensified in the years since the Self-ID law was approved, and the most widely seen media have conveyed these issues in a broadly positive light. This is not to say there have been no negative articles in the press, but these are usually only opinion pieces. There are two major problems here. The first being that these opinion pieces are not written by experts, examples from psychology, medicine, sociology, or etc. We have a dialect of professionals from these fields willing to publicly speak up and criticize the gender identity movement. The second problem is the fact that almost all of these opinion pieces seem to be written by conservatives. In addition, no established women's organization has publicly taken a stand against gender identity ideology yet, and all parties on the left either appear to publicly support it or do not explicitly oppose it. This encourages the idea that the criticism is only coming from the right wing. Some pieces made by male psychologists published by a major national newspaper, Público, have explicitly referred to puberty blockers as completely reversible, while claiming scientific neutrality. And all of this is happening while funding for academic research about trans-identified people keeps increasing. A campaign that took place in 2022, applied named ABC LGBTQIAA+, draws attention to the ever-changing language of gender identity ideology. This was developed and promoted by Fox Live, a TV channel that is part of the bigger Fox group, with the help of ILGA Portugal. Several posters were displayed in various cities explaining terms like dead naming, gender identity, and non-binary, and the definitions also appeared on TV in one of Portugal's major newspaper, Público, and online. All these definitions, including those for lesbian, gay, and bisexual, omitted any mention of biological sex, replacing it with gender, even when it makes for awkward reading, such as with the definition of trans. Person whose gender identity and or expression does not match the gender assigned to them at birth. This reflects a relatively recent trend in gender identity ideology, where one can no longer even say that a male claiming to be a woman was indeed born a male. It is an erasure of the body through the manipulation of language, and is even contrary to the premise that first allowed the ideology to take off, since the original myth was that the trans woman had a woman's brain in a man's body. Acknowledging biological sex was at one point important to explain why there was a need of transition. In addition to the ILGA's organization, there are a growing number of other organizations producing updated guides, such as this year's ex-aequo Guide on Health and Laws, Trans in Portugal, Resources and Procedures, where they advise on legal issues, medical issues, school context, family context, steps for medical transition, hormonal interventions, surgery, family planning, sports, and so on. They criticize the laws, affirm they are still very rigid, and do not follow international norms of World Professional Association for Transgender Health, that there is constant policing of non-normative bodies in sport, among other statements that aim to reinforce and expand social pressures on those who do not agree with this ideology. Portugal does not have any laws that criminalize feminicide, despite having a huge domestic violence problem that seems to get worse every year. 13 women were killed in domestic violence incidents in the first 6 months of 2022. In 2021, the total reported was 16. This does not take into consideration the human trafficking of women and girls for sexual exploitation in the prostitution system itself. Instead, HMARS has been focusing on our marches and their agendas. The Commission for Citizenship and Gender Equality is a public administration body supervised by the Office of the Secretary of State for Equality of the Presidency of the Council of Ministers. Its mission is to ensure the implementation of public policies within the scope of citizenship and the promotion and defense of gender equality. The network was created in 2004 and is the only European space where government representatives can meet and share knowledge, discuss common challenges, and possible measures to combat discrimination based on sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, and sexual characteristics. To date, the network is made up of 34 European states that hold biannual meetings. In addition to work meetings, the program includes workshops in parallel sessions and appointment of organizers of the IDA Forum, International Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia. The Commission for Gender Equality represents Portugal in the government focal points network for LGBTY issues. It is in 2019, with approval of a national equality and non-discrimination strategy, Portugal Plus Equal, that Portugal has an autonomous plan entitled Action Plan to Combat Discrimination on Grounds of Sexual Orientation, Identity and Gender Expression, and Sexual Characteristics. According to the Genitourinary and Sexual Reconstructive Unit of Coimbra's Hospital and University Center, on social medias, there is a growing number of young people under the age of 18 looking for surgery, as well as a growing number of cases of children wanting to change sex that we hear about nowadays. The growing on even younger population in Portugal is happening, and the social media is working in that direction. Despite of this, one of our members from WDI have been at a reading book for kids organized by drag queens last month at a very popular marketplace, and the place was empty, zero audience. Only some random customers passing by the book area to grab some free coffee. So I have made this resume with the help of another woman from WDI Portugal, and this is just to make you aware of the situation right now in Portugal, and I hope that we can join and create solutions for these laws and these ideologies that is increasing in the population and without really scientific information. Thank you.
We spoke briefly yesterday about the similarities between Portugal and Ireland and Malta and other very traditionally religiously conservative Catholic countries, and how a lot of these men's rights have been brought in before women's rights were addressed. So there are definite comparisons. I think it was the same year, wasn't it, that Portugal brought in self-ID as Ireland, 2015?
Yes, it started, well, it's not started in that year, but well, the major public was not really aware of what was happening. Some things were said and just sometimes were noticed, but just a little few things and in a very human rights ways.
Yes, I think activists are pushing this as a human rights issue when really we need to be looking at this from a safeguarding lens. And I can see that a common conversation has been going on in the chat about whether we need to amend gender laws or repeal gender laws. I think from a safeguarding position, it has to be repeal, and WDI UK did put out a statement recently about the need for repeal to restore safeguarding. So I know these conversations have to happen in all countries where there is self-ID, but it is definitely becoming clear that we have de facto self-ID, you know, even if it isn't written into law. All a gender identity claim is self-identification. A man is identifying himself as a woman. It's always self-ID. So really good to hear from you and hear from Portugal, because we're in a very similar pathway in Ireland. Will you be able to hang around after the presentation?
Yes, of course.
Wonderful.
I'm here to tell you what is happening in Italy on surrogacy. On June 19, the Italian Parliament will start discussing a bill that could be a milestone in the fight against this practice. The law was proposed by the ruling Conservative majority and would make it a crime to resort to the procedure, even in countries where it is legal, such as the United States or Canada. The bill is part of the socially conservative agenda of Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, a self-declared enemy of gender ideology. Surrogacy is already illegal in Italy, punishable with jail terms ranging from 3 months to 2 years and fines from 600,000 euros to 1 million euros. But what happens is that couples, heterosexual and homosexual, go abroad and come back with a baby in their arms and want to register him or her as their child. The network for the inviolability of the female body, RADFEM Italy, FINARGIT, International Feminist Network Against Artificial Reproduction, Gender Ideology and Transhumanism, have always shared the goal of universal abolition of womb for rent. We think that the bill constitutes a decisive step in the direction of universal abolition, offering, when approved, a model for other national legislation and giving greater force to any possible action by the Italian government in international bodies. We have called on parliamentarians of all majority and opposition parties to support the bill with their vote, regardless of partisan logic and consistent with the unequivocal ruling of our Constitutional Court that surrogacy intolerably offends the dignity of women and deeply undermines human relations. The law has received also the support of the important abolitionist organizations like CHAMS, International Coalition for the Abolition of Surrogacy, Stop Surrogacy Now, FINRAGE, Feminist International Network of Resistance to Reproductive and Genetic Engineering, the Japan Coalition and others. Together with them, eminent figures of international feminism as Silviana Gaczynski, Gina Correa, and Phyllis Chesler. So according to CHAMS, this is a historic occasion to defend the ban on this new form of trafficking. You would expect that those on the left who strongly oppose surrogacy would be eager to vote the bill. Unfortunately, political logic prevails here. So we see many women and men who until today have been by our side in this battle grapple with straws. A striking example of this is a document signed by many intellectual, local administrators, politicians, and feminists, which condemns surrogacy but never names the law in question and invokes a generic universal ban, asking unidentified international organization to launch it. As we all know, the possibility that United Nations or another international body decides to declare surrogacy a universal crime, as was the case for female genital mutilation, it is equal to zero. So it is completely hypocritical to declare yourself against surrogacy and not support this law. It will now be necessary to see what will happen in Parliament, where, in any case, the Conservative parties already have the majority to pass the measure. But I believe that if feminists or those who declare themselves as such miss this historic opportunity to stand up for this law in the name of political belonging, it will be a defeat for all of us. The Democratic Party and other leftist forces will face the same dilemma next week in the European Parliament, thanks to the Europarlamentarian of the Brothers of Italy, Nicola Procaccini. He said, "We are convinced that a discussion on surrogacy is also needed in the European Parliament, in addition to the debate that, thanks to FBI, is underway in the Italian Parliament to make this practice a universal crime." This plenary discussion can be seen as the foundation for a future, hopefully condemning, resolution to be built in the coming months in the European Parliament. In Italy, one of the objections to the law is that it would penalize children because parents would go to jail, but this law would not penalize, but would protect children. Both the Constitutional Court and the Court of Cassation have affirmed this in various years, ruling that surrogacy, in addition to offending the dignity of women, deeply undermines human relationships, so also parent-child relationship. In any case, the parent of intent so far with a clean record, if convicted for this crime, could benefit from a suspended sentence, so he would not go to jail, he or she. Another objection is that this law attacks rainbow's families and their children, but the law applies to everyone. It is true that homosexual couples are more immediately intercepted than heterosexual couples, who also constitute the majority of customers. In any case, the ban on resorting to gestation for others abroad would considerably reduce the number of clients, at least due to the fact that, in addition to the already significant expense for the procedure, there would be the risk to incur a fine of between €600,000 and €1 million. The dilemma of the Italian left on surrogate wombs addresses many other issues dear to us, from the free gender identity or self-ID to the various declinations of artificial reproduction of the human, to the hormonization of girls and boys who are not compliant with gender stereotypes. The issue of trans children will be among the next to explode, as it has in the United Kingdom, in Northern Europe, in Australia, and in some American states, where these therapies are now understood as dangerous in vivo experimentation. And there is also the issue of the trans women in sports, as I already heard from our friends from Ireland. Today in Italy, there will be many pride processions and manifestations supported by parties and institutions from every political side, even though in the document, the activists claim the right to prostitution, surrogacy, gender identity, and so on. As we know very well, because we experienced it, if somebody says, "I can't support this because it is against my values," he or she is branded as homophobic and against human rights. It happened in the last days in Rome, where the president of Lazio region, Francesco Rocca, decided to withdraw his support to the Pride event, based on the fact that he supports surrogacy. Up to now, the Italian Democratic Party is succeeding in keeping in keeping this divisive matter under wraps as much as possible. On the other side, a united right has been studying the issue for some time and has acted, while the left suffers delays and excesses of caution and now finds itself dealing with a sensational rebound. The discontent cut to them, Silvia Costa, one of the founders of the Democratic Party, complained about the surreptitious legitimization of the uterus for rent by Ellie Schlein, the new secretary of the Democratic Party. At this point, the Italian left is at a crossroad. It should decide if, in line with all Western progressive parties, is moving in a transhuman direction, or if the Italian Democratic Party is different from other left-wing parties and is able to find its own original path, which could be configured as a neo-humanism with feminine maternal root, where the carnal and symbolic relation between the mother and daughter or son returns to be the foundation of human communities. And that's all.
In multiple countries, there are celebrities selling this surrogacy idea as some wonderful gift that women can do. And I'm wondering, is that a big factor in Italy?
No, in Italy, we don't have some people who made themselves, a model. I mean, we have one politician who did it, yes, and actually one singer, Ferro, who did it, but not so many, I must say. I think in Italy, the majority of people really abhor this practice. So it's not something that you really want to say aloud. I mean, there is a bit. I mean, people know that that the majority of Italians are against it. So yes, Tiziano Ferro and this Nicky Vendola, these politicians who is always giving interviews and saying how his family is wonderful and there is a lot of love. But I don't see many testimonials of this practice. I'm sure that if we did a referendum or something, the big majority would reject surrogacy also abroad. So I'm really hoping that this law passes, and I am optimistic, and I think it will be a great step towards the abolition of surrogacy.
My Italian feminist friends basically are of the opinion, very strongly so, that they're fundamentally against, Meloni, and so that's the key point. So they fundamentally just oppose this with the argument that, it's going to adversely impact gay and lesbian couples, well, gay couples. What do you say to them?
Yes, I know. I mean, I think it's an ideological no, because Meloni is from the far right, and so she's from the right, and so they have to oppose her. But I don't see how this is going to impact on gay couples and lesbian couples. The thing your friend is referring to is that with Meloni government, the law is being applied. So gay and lesbian couples who have children abroad, especially gay couples who have surrogacy, they can't go to the municipal and register their children as father and father, or mother and mother, but they have to go through stepchild adoption. But this is not the government who decided it. It's a court. I mean, there are tribunals who decided this. It's only that before the law was not applied, and now they decided to apply it. So they said to every city that they can't register these couples. They can register only the biological father or mother, and then there is this process that has been made quicker, and they go through the stepchild adoption. So I think when she says it's a threat, she refers to this, but in reality it's only propaganda, because it's not against I mean, it's against the practice, and this is only applying the law. As radical feminists, we oppose the registration of homosexual parents coming from surrogacy from abroad, just registration without any stepchild adoption process. I think that makes the practice legal in a way.
Grazie.
Prego.
Thanks, Sam, for that extra dimension. And thank you very much, Monica, and a brilliant presentation. We have an opportunity for Sheila Jeffries to introduce a piece of classic video footage. I'm going to hand over to Sheila to explain.
The video on drag queens shows how in the early 1970s, lesbian feminists rejected drag, and it shows some drag queens speaking and showing how hostile they actually are to women. And I think it's a useful video because a lot of people today do not understand that there was a huge feminist reaction to and rejection of drag and all of those sorts of performances by gay men way back in the early 1970s. And in fact, I can remember going to a mixed gay club in the late 1970s. There was a drag act. The man had balloons up his jumper. He came over, because they always came over, and harangued lesbians. And as he was haranguing us, one of the women put a cigarette out and his balloon went down. We were then thrown out by the bouncers. My friend got a broken nose. We ended up at the hospitals because she was head-butted down the stairs. This is the relationship historically. So that's why I think it's a useful thing to know about the history of drag and lesbian feminism.
What about drag queens?
What about drag queens?
I mean, they want to be women, so...
What, you mean if you got a sex change, would that mean you're okay? No, because you're still a man. That's not what makes a woman a woman.
Wonderful.
There's more to it than that.
He's a drag queen, and the divine drag queen. All drag queens, whether divine or human, belong essentially to the men's association.
I mean, men aren't even complete human beings. The male gene is an incomplete female gene. That's why he's got this built-in inferiority complex. He's always pulling those lousy stunts.
Well, here's the story. When I was 4 years old, I used to put blocks in my socks because I always wanted to wear high heels. And I used to do it very secretively, you know. Well, I came to San Francisco and I found out that it was really okay, and I wear my high heels on days like today because I've always wanted to wear high heels. You know, I think it's okay, you know, it's perfectly all right to wear high heels. I get a little flack now and again, but I can handle it, I hope.
My feeling is about drag, it's degrading to women. And I don't pretend to understand what motivates the men to do that, but I know that the whole society mocks women at the same time that it pushes them into that role. And I think that there are women still all over the country, all over the world, suffering from trying to be that stereotype and being taught continually that that's what they're to be. And then to see men just getting off on it and knowing that they're not stuck with the oppression that goes with it, that they're just having a good time. They can take off their dress and their makeup and just be free of that role. It's really, to me, it's a very, very heavy issue.
Oh, I love it. I made a decision a long time ago not to do anything I didn't feel good about, to have a good time, to have fun. I mean, it's the only thing worth doing.
Really, I haven't taken any time to deal with drag queens or men who are into drag because I find it offensive.
Drag is just the tool that you use to express who you are. And in terms of clothes, some people wear leather, some people wear feathers, some people wear sequins, some people wear Levi's. It's all drag. It's all a tool to tell other people who you are.
I like outrageousness, you know, like I like punk rock and I like crazy things, but I'm a punk rock freak. But drag is somewhat offensive to me.
And I think that when you're having a good time, people relate to that goodness, even if it's not their style.
When I see men dressed up as Anita Bryant lookalikes, and which is what they're doing most of the time in a very offensive way, because there's no description for womanhood in my mind.
It runs from all sorts. I mean, people love it, people hate it, the same way that people love or hate you no matter what. but it's a focusing device, you know? It's like a magnifying glass that just makes it clearer, it makes it bigger in your eyes. And I still relate to people, hopefully, as I would relate to them outside of this dress and this feathers and these makeups.
Or into what? Into it as a giggle. I talked to a guy at the thing we went to last Sunday, and it's just a giggle.
Yeah, because it's fun. There's also a political sentiment behind it. I mean, I feel a victim of sexism, and I think to understand what I am victimized about, I have to understand what sex is all about, both as a homosexual, as relating to women, sex in the terms of the clothes that they wear and stuff. This helps me feel androgynous or hermaphrodite. I mean, it makes me feel like a whole person instead of just half a person, just like I'm part of the whole human race rather than just half of it.
Sisters and brothers, our sister Jean O'Leary.
It's times like this that I find it very hard to be gay and proud because there's another side of me that's a woman. And I'm insulted by this mockery and these costumes up here by these people. Now, also, lesbian feminist liberation has negotiated for a week and a half.
Listen to her. You listen to everyone else. Listen. That is the least we can do for each other. Listen to her.
Lesbian feminist liberation negotiated for a week and a half, using the means that rational women and women have always used in the past, not disruptive means, to try to get up here and read a statement. We were told no, that there would be no political statements read today, because one person, a man, Sylvia, gets up here and causes a ruckus. We are now allowed to read our statement. And I think that says something right there. Now, I'd like to go on and speak, but I have written here a statement that is backed up by 100 women, and this was voted on, so I'm just going to read this statement.
Now, you open anymore, you can't do it.
When men impersonate women for reasons of entertainment or profit, they insult women. We support the right of every person to dress in the way that she or he wishes, but we are opposed to the exploitation of women by men for entertainment or profit. Men have been telling us who we are all our lives. They have tried to do it with scholarship, with religion, with psychiatry. When all else fails, they have used humor to tell us and each other who and what we are. What we object to today is another instance in which men laughing with one another at what they present as women are telling us who they think we are. We don't want to know. Men have never been able to show us ourselves. We are coming into a time and a place as women at which we can and do show one another who we are. What they think of women. Let us tell you who we are.
Okay, so we do have Tanya here, wonderfully. Thank you very much, Tanya, for joining us. You have a presentation to share today about the Dyke March Berlin.
So the reason for this presentation is to make awareness and hopefully support and participation to the real Dyke March in Berlin, 23rd of June, and that's like in approximately or like 14 days. And the real Dyke March is a march initiated by young lesbians in Germany. And to give you a context, I will read what Susanna, one of the young lesbian organizers, has written. The real Dyke March was formed after attacks on lesbians at the Dyke March Cologne 2022, where lesbians were peacefully holding a sign with the definition of lesbian and lesbian not queer. One woman standing on the ledge held a rainbow flag with LGB, another woman who loves women and detransitioned, a sign saying, "Stop transing the gay away." And here you see some pictures to give you more context. I guess it's the same situation everywhere, also in Norway. So this dude are representing lesbians, and the lesbians reply. Trans activists in the Dyke March, among them men, came up to the woman, then stole and ripped apart their signs and physically assaulted the women while the organizers stood by. Afterwards, the organizers lied, saying that the women, lesbians, had been saying that the lesbian attacked them. But this is not true. The lesbians were peacefully demonstrating. And they never mentioned the violence against the lesbians nor distanced themselves from it. It was captured on video. In Berlin, despite the police escorting us, as Susanna writes, they tried to kick us out of the Dyke March. Trans activists gathered around us and screamed at us. The police, fearing an escalation, told us to stay behind. A group of men shouted, "Some dykes have dicks, get over it." Other men tried to block our path and gave us the middle finger. Women, some there with their boyfriends, tried to burn our banner with the definition of lesbian. In Hamburg, so-called parliamentary observers came to the Dyke March to spot us and call the police on us. Police permitted us to walk at the Dyke March, but trans activists gathered and wouldn't move. They screamed at us, lied down to play dead. Some men who call themselves lesbians gave speeches, and we were jumped at, and a woman was hit on the lip and scratched. Then the police pushed us out of the march while the crowd cheered. At the end, we were threatened by a man in drag while the police seemed to support him. In Bremen, we were kicked off the Trans Inter Dyke March and our signs got stolen. Once again, they got aggressive when we tried to document this, and they tried to prevent us from filming. We also went to 3 Christopher Street Days demonstrations, which were way more peaceful. We were given high fives and hugs. To this day, there never was an apology, support, or any distancing from the violence against us by any politicians or Dyke March organizer. But we are lesbians, not queer, and we are here. So this is the call out. We ask you to join us in Berlin at the Dyke March. And I want to read some of the goals the Dyke March has. It's to rebuild the Dyke marches and the lesbian movement, connect lesbians and lesbian culture, build up lesbian culture and communities, especially among younger lesbians. Let lesbians organize politically, be visible as lesbians who are opposed to trans activist lobby and terrorism, connect with lesbian groups globally, let lesbians define what it means to be a lesbian, take back the power, and let lesbians speak for themselves. We're working towards lesbian liberation. Because we are proud to be homosexuals, love does not imply pacifism. We will defend ourselves when under attack. No means no. Change doesn't come by itself. Courage paves the way to our liberation. The hatred we face only makes us stronger. We are, we were, and we will be. We are strong as a group. No one is left behind. We work towards the liberation of our sisters. No woman is free until all are free. And the brilliant lesbian performance band Hungry Hearts will be there together with the young lesbians in Berlin and their Dyke March. There will be a concert and an after party, and we will do it all in the open. We are going to take back the streets, and we expect the police to protect us and safeguard us. So we will be dancing in the streets of Berlin. We will not hide, because lesbians just want to have fundamental rights. And regarding our own Dyke March this year, everybody ought to know, trans activists are organizing 2 official counter demonstrations, distributing leaflets calling us hateful, a danger, and an inhumane group, and called to give us no more space on their streets, in their clubs and bars. Dyke March Berlin's announcement for this year is against the hated transphobia coming from our own community. And they didn't publish this year's route. We're getting lots of support from German Red Fem organizations. And just to let you know, we prefer registration, so please spread the words. So we ask for everybody's participation the way you can. Either come and join the real Dyke March, or in any other way. You could tell the German government that the world is watching and demand and expect the protection of lesbians against violence. So we ask again for your participation and solidarity. Please engage in the way you can. And here on the next picture are emails to the police and people in the government. You can write them email, tell them to protect lesbians and dykes, and or right to express ourselves, also in the real Dyke March. And those of you who can, please donate money. We need sound equipment, we need equipment for guards, and for the whole organizing of the march. And here you can see when it starts, and all this, I can make this PowerPoint available for everybody and take out the pictures so you can get all the information later. These are the hashtags: the real Dyke March, lesbian uprising, lesbian Aufstand, lesbian not queer, we are strong, we are here, women protect women, lesbian nights, lesbian nights. These are the hashtags. Join us in Berlin, spread the words on social media, donating to cover expenses, for example, for security, write letters of support to German government and police, and participate in hashtags. Yes, we are strong, we are here. Some pictures. Eyes on dykes in Berlin, dancing in the streets. Spread the word. Follow these accounts to get more information, and join the campaign to make everybody aware of young lesbians taking back the streets of Berlin. Thank you.
Tack, Tonya, that's fantastic. A real rousing end to today's wonderful panel. Solidarity with you always. And I agree with what Sheila's saying in the chat. It is wonderful to see a real feminist lesbian fight back. So thanks for all you're doing. Thanks to all our panelists today. We only went slightly over with our technical issues. Thank you very much to the tech team, keeping it all working. Bernadette, as ever. Thanks to Laura for doing live translations. Everyone involved in the preparation for today, and all of you who took your time out to join us today.